This is my favorite band you're talking about.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Listography. Jason and Joe here. No Cramser today, but we are instead joined by the one and only Nordista Freeze. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. I'm doing really well. Really excited. Really appreciate the opportunity. I love the channel, and I've, when you hit me up about it, I was already a fan. So honored to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Glad to have you. I met you about a month ago or so now, maybe 2 months. I went to see Dylan Seavey's band, the Minks. Dylan's been on the show before.
Right.
He did our game show called Record Mendations a while back. Some viewers may remember it. I went to see his band on tour. They were in DC, and you were on the bill as well. And your set floored me. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So asked you to come on, and you've got a great new record out as well, Big Sky Pipe Dream.
Yes, thank you so much, man. That was a great night too. I'm glad you were there for that. He was one of the few.
Yeah, it was one of those like nice intimate shows, nice Wednesday night in DC.
Yeah, that's right.
So do you want to tell anyone about the record before we get into the task at hand?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I put out a record called Big Sky Pipe Dream just about a couple months ago, and just got off the road. I've been touring it for a couple months, and that's when I ran into you. Yeah, it's a record that I tracked to tape with my band. We've been touring like crazy because I just love being on the road. And so I tried to make a record that emulated that, and also kind of called back to the 60s. I've been really into 60s music for the last couple of years. Beach Boys and beyond, American and British, whatever it is, it's just kind of floored me. And so I tried to make a record that kind of emulated that inspiration. And so we tracked it mainly to tape and a lot of harmonies and 12-string guitar and stuff. And really proud of how it came out, recording it just together, inside our house and stuff. So grateful for my band for knowing how to do stuff like that. And that's actually how I found out about your page originally. Was I was going through the Beach Boys list. That's one band that I can actually comment on 30 different albums on because I just love them all. So yeah, man.
So first of all, I love the record. I've been listening to it a lot since that show. And you can definitely hear all those 60s influence, especially Beach Boys and stuff. There are a lot of harmonies on the record. But today we're talking about Daft Punk, which I can't say I hear a lot of Daft Punk on your record. So when we were like brainstorming ideas of bands to talk about, that one seemed a little out of left field compared to everything else you were mentioning. So what's your background with Daft Punk, and why is that what we're doing today?
Well, yeah, Daft Punk were like one of the first bands when you were asking me, and I was thinking, what bands do I know their entire discography? So I was thinking back to all the bands that really, were pivotal for me, bands that I really just became obsessed with. Because I don't normally do that. I don't normally go through an entire discography of a band. I kind of listen to a few records and then I keep moving. And but they were the first band. Actually, the first band I ever got into was Family Force 5. And there was a Christian band. And I was in elementary school. When I got to 5th grade, my brother gave me some Daft Punk, and it just changed me. It was the first time that I'd heard anything like that. And I felt like when a lot of kids get into rock and roll, I actually didn't get into rock and roll until like late high school. It was electronic music for me. It was Daft Punk and Justice and Mastercraft and all these bands at the time. And they just, something about it just really clicked with me, and I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with every record by Daft Punk at the time. I ordered a live 1997 from like somewhere overseas, and it turned out it was a bootleg that I got off eBay. Would listen to that all the time, listen to them all on my CD player. It's just a formative band for me, and truly just one of the best bands ever. I mean, they're really kind of a flawless band. I mean, we're going to get into it today. I don't know what y'all's opinions are, but just a truly a beautiful band that every decision they made is just so intentional and just perfect to me. So I'm really excited to break into it with y'all.
How about you, Joe? How much Daft Punk have you listened to in the past?
Well, I actually do know every album. I don't know every album from all these bands that we usually do, but this is a shorter discography. And for some reason, I listened to them all at some point in my life. I wouldn't say like I'm a huge Daft Punk fan, like overall, but they're a cool band, interesting, unique. And my favorite album by them, I really, really do like a ton. So interesting to see how this all plays out, because some of the albums, it's just like, well, this isn't my style. Like I want to like it, but so we'll get into that though.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see your comments on it, being such a big fan.
Totally. I'm excited.
For me, the only one I know for sure that I've listened to in the past is Random Access Memories. Listened to that when it came out, had all the big hits on it, and all the other stuff was like the first time I've sat down and listened to it. But I was surprised going through. I would say I knew probably at least 50% of all the other records. Like so many of these songs seem to have like just infiltrated and like become part of the culture and the sound of, I don't even know where I heard half these songs, probably like Pandora or something. I don't know where I listened to them, but was familiar with a ton of these, and probably a lot of it was in advertising and stuff too. But yeah, so a lot of it was new, but some of it I had heard before, but not sure where. But yeah, let's get into it. I guess we're going 4 studio albums plus the Tron soundtrack, which we are including because it is entirely them on the soundtrack, just like we did with Queen and the Flash soundtrack and Eurythmics with their 1984 soundtrack. So we're going to keep that trend going. So 5 in all for us to rank. Who wants to start? Joe, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I have is the middle with experience here. I will start with an album that's very disappointing to me. I don't want to, it's tough because you start out on a bad note here. Human After All is going to be my number 5. And it's tough because I heard this one after probably Random Access Memories, and I had already heard Discovery. So I was like, okay, I better go through and flesh out my knowledge of Daft Punk. And this one just kind of killed the mood for me. It's so repetitive and not in like a good way. Like Discovery's repetitiveness like works, and because they expand and they branch out in all these interesting directions. But on this one, even the songs I like Robot Rock and Human After All, there's these choices they make, like the voice modulator they use all over this album. I just hate the sound of it. Like it's like an annoying like kids cartoon kind of weird vocal effect. They don't have like the guest singing like they do in Random Access Memories and Discovery. And the songs, like it's just too much into like house music for me to like really like it. And I feel like this one, like Homework has that kind of like homebrew feel to it. Like this one is like overly slick and not very memorable and too repetitive for me. And like I would listen to a song, I'd like fast forward it a minute and like it. So that like those are the problems for me. I know this one, the critics didn't love this one either. I think it got some lower ratings. So I feel pretty comfortable putting this down here at 2 stars for my number 5.
Wow. Okay. Am I next?
Yeah, you can go next.
So and then am I listing out of 5 stars?
You don't have to. We always do. If you feel like you have a grasp of a star system, sure, go for it.
I can do that. Okay. So my bottom pick, my number 5 is got to be the Tron soundtrack. I have to be candid for any Daft Punk extraordinaires who are watching this that I've not seen the film Tron, and perhaps that would transform my perspective on it. And I do respect, one thing I've always respected about Daft Punk is that they do switch it up on every record. They go for new things, and they have, they've got their iconic sound, but they're not willing to, or they're not afraid of pushing into something new. I guess it's cool that they did like a score, but to me, I don't know if I would be aware that a lot of the tracks are even Daft Punk if I had just seen the film and not known that. And so to me, it's just missing a little bit of the secret sauce. It just doesn't quite excite me. Also, I have moved beyond like my Daft Punk obsession when this film came out, I had already was like into other things at the time. So I do feel like maybe the other albums are all with rose tinted glasses, as they say. Maybe this one I'm just too sobered up. And but yeah, I can't get into it. I always wanted to. And I was trying to listen to it today. So I was like, maybe it'll change my mind. It'll hop up to number 4, but no, that's the bottom for me. It's not a record I would listen to. So but good on them for doing it. And I'm sure they raked in some good money. I'm pretty sure that was made by Disney, right? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not.
All right, yeah, I'm with Freeze at the bottom. I got Tron soundtrack as well, and I pretty much feel the way he feels. I've never seen the movie either. I feel like listening to it, it seems like it would be a good score, and I can imagine like knowing what I kind of know what the movie looks like. I can imagine those sounds with those visuals and having it work really well. But as an album, not judging it as a score, but judging it as an album that I put on and listen to without the visual, I don't think it is very interesting. And like Freeze said, I don't think that you can really tell that it's Daft Punk. There's not a whole lot of Daft Punkness to it. So for that reason, that's why it's at my bottom. 2 stars on that one.
Oh, I give it 3 stars. For the record.
Well, this one's going to get me some, I don't know, the French house fans out there are not going to like the placement of this one. I got Homework at number 4. And I know it's very influential, and I know it's just, beloved by many people, many critics across the world. I think this is a great album. And maybe it was like in 97, because it was just like, no, nobody had ever heard anything like this before. But to me, listening to it right now, it's just kind of like noise. Like I just don't get it. And maybe I have to be like in the club and like with the flashing lights and like the giant sound systems and everything. But like the 7 minutes of Around the World and 7 minutes of Rolling and Scratching, all I hear is kind of repetition. I don't hear the things in music I want to hear, which is like, melody and structure and stuff. And I'm a bad person to judge this album because it is just not for me. So I have it at 2.5 stars. I think it's interesting, but I just would never listen to this, if we weren't doing a Daft Punk listography.
Right. That's actually my next pick as well. Yeah, I know that it is iconic, and I do actually like it a lot. When there was a time when that was my favorite record, it did definitely take. It is extremely repetitious, and it is. Some of the songs are really long. I do think they have some really cool charm to them. I will also say, I believe that album came out in 97, if I'm not mistaken. And like, there's also a record called Alive 1997, one of their 2 live records. That record is incredibly exciting. You can hear the crowd cheering. You can hear them switching stuff up in real time. And Homework, it almost starts out the way they've got that fake crowd noise at the very beginning. And it's like, there's like people cheering and there's like sirens and stuff. And you can kind of see like, oh, like we're in like a club right now. Like they're trying to recreate a club like on a record. But yeah, if you're just kind of listening to it, I can understand how it might fall a little flat. Also, a lot of the songs are recontextualized later on that Alive 2007 when they use those songs to recreate and spin. So I think I do have a little bit of a bias knowing, the context of those songs and how they use them on their live records. But yeah, it is a great record. I'm going to give it a 4-star, but I think that the other records that we're about to get into do have a little bit more in them for like listening. And maybe because I'm the same way as you, I do prefer like some structure. I've definitely got a pop sensibility, even if it's Captain Beefheart. I like it for some pop sensibility that it has, that this definitely doesn't have.
All right, Homework is a unanimous number 4.
Whoa.
I've got a number 4 also.
No way.
And I kind of want to like it more than I do, but I agree. The repetition on it is just a problem for me personally. I think a lot of the ideas are really cool. I think a lot of the sounds they're using are really cool. The groove on Revolution 909 is great. There's really cool synth leads on The Funk. I love the synth bass on Teachers. And I think they really demonstrate how good they are at building up tracks. And like, even though it's repeating and repeating, like an element will come in and then it'll go away. So they get some dynamic fluctuation just by like adding a piece, taking a piece away. And I think they're really good at that. And I think that's very apparent on this record. I just can't get like fully into the tracks without some sort of melodic movement. Like it doesn't take you like from one place to another at all. It's just the groove. And I mean, I know that's what it's meant to be. And like Joe, I just don't think it's really made for me. But on a track like Around the World, all they do on that track is just add that vocoder melody. And all of a sudden, I think it just elevates everything. Just that little bit of melody is all it needs to become like really awesome. So I wish there was more of that on this record. Just 2 stars for me.
Totally. We don't quite get to their iconic vocoders. Like they're now, like if Daft Punk could be featured on a song, you're like, that's Daft Punk. I don't recall any of that on Homework. You know, like they're trying different stuff out, but there's not that like iconic Daft Punk melodies or guitar solo melodies and stuff that are featured on later records, you know.
All right. Well, my number 3 is going to be the Tron Legacy soundtrack. I have seen the movie, so maybe that helps me kind of visualize and contextualize the album, because it does work great. Like you're watching the movie, you know the soundtrack is excellent. But I do get it, because as an album itself, it's a little samey. I do like the mixture of like the futuristic synth sound, sort of like an 80s callback a little bit. You know, the original Tron, of course, came out in the 80s, I believe. And then like the big orchestration, I think is pretty good. I think that's arranged well, catchy, a lot of like urgent, you know, big kind of stabbing violins and stuff. And I think there's some cool songs on here. I actually much prefer the reconfigured version of this. I think it's really good. Daft Punk got a bunch of people to remix and redo the tracks, and it was awesome. So might be kind of thinking about that a little bit as I rate this as well. So I have this at 3 stars. I think Derez and Fall are pretty good. Recognizer, the Tron Legacy end titles. Like it has cool elements, and I think it just sounds good, and not quite as much like, you know, like 7-minute kind of like dance songs. Like these have sort of like a beginning and end point. So I like it. I don't love it. I don't think it's like the greatest standalone soundtrack of all time, but 3 stars. I think it's cool sounding at least, and it does maybe suffer from a little lack of personality as far as like it could be like Jerry Goldsmith or something. Don't quite get the Daft Punkiness of it, but I still think it sounds good.
Yeah, that's fair. My next pick is Random Access Memories. That is number 3 for me. I mean, we're getting into, for me, just iconic levels. So it's not even that I really have much that ranks it below the other 2, but I think it's an incredibly impressive record. I mean, Human After All, I think is 2005, and this one's 2013. And it is just such, I mean, and now I guess it's their closing, you know, it's their final record, which I don't, you know, side note, I don't really know. I was surprised that they felt the need to break up when they've, as a band, been so, they'll just go silent for years as is. So it's like they could just not make another record till 2030. And I think we would all be patient about it. So I definitely was surprised by that, but this is a great record to go out on. It's a record that, you know, by its name is flying through time and space and recalling memories and, you know, their story and the stories beyond them, featuring a lot of special guests. I love Panda Bear. I think having him on there is so cool. Just the whole record sounds great. And it really, they found a way to be, to just do one of the hardest things I think possible, which is like culminate all of their past sounds together in a way that's perhaps even more accessible than any of their other records. Like if you were going to give someone who was not familiar with their music a record just to try to get them to like get into Daft Punk, it's like a great starting place. And it's just amazing that they could incorporate all of these different ideas that I know so iconically as them and still put it in a way that is just such a great accessible gift. But it also doesn't feel like they've like sold out. It doesn't feel like they were trying to do that. It doesn't feel like, oh, they just wanted to make a song with Pharrell or something. Even though I know they're longtime collaborators with him, it's like, it's just an incredible record. And, I think it's going to really stand the test of time, and perhaps 10 years from now, and I don't know what y'all's ranking is, but I do think it might, one day be the most iconic record by them. Like it might be the one record that people remember the most, even though other records might have been more influential for their time. It might be the best one to give to someone, to your kid one day or something.
All right. So before I get into my next one, I just want to say that this is not going to be like the Faith No More listography where I didn't get above a 2.5. I do have a couple records here that exceed 2.5 stars. But I want to say that now because I think my comments on the next record may upset some people. My number 3 is Discovery. I have it at 2.5 stars. And so after listening to Homework, I always go sequentially when we do this. So I listened to Homework first, then I got to Discovery, and I wanted more melody. And I did get it on Discovery, but it wasn't like what I wanted. A lot of the things, and this could entirely be because of when I'm listening to it now in 2021 and not listening to it in 2001. But this record reminds me so much of things from the early 2000s, probably that it influenced, that I just did not like. So it just calls to mind like a lot of really bad early 2000s pop music to me that I'm not into. Like One More Time to me sounds like a Black Eyed Peas song. The song Digital Love to me sounds like Owl City or something like that. I don't know. I just am not into a lot of these tracks. The guitar solo, I will say, on Aerodynamic rules. I love that. But yeah, something about this record just feels super of its time in a way that I am not a fan of. If I had heard this in 2001, maybe it would have like blown my mind like it did so many other people's, but retroactively, I just hear all of the things that it inspired and influenced that I'm not a fan of. So I don't know. I could not get into it. 2.5 stars. I appreciate it. And I will say this, you can definitely see their skill developing and their sound developing and them changing and figuring out like a different path than just sticking strictly with the Homework sound, which is cool. And I think with their next record, they do something even more interesting. So still to come.
I think I would have bet like hundreds of thousands of dollars that Discovery would be at least number 2, way ahead of Human After All. That was blowing my mind even more than Faith No More. So, well, I don't know how to defend that. My number 2 is gonna be Random Access Memories. I like this album. I don't quite share the same enthusiasm as our friend here or the critics who hailed it as, a masterpiece and everything like that. Got really high ratings across the board, which, that's fine. For some reason, they gave it higher ratings than they ever gave Discovery when it came out. So I think critics are just kind of full of it. But plenty of good songs on here, especially once you get to like the middle of the album. You get Instant Crush with Julian Casablancas. You got 2 excellent Pharrell Williams tracks, and I love Pharrell, and he can do no wrong. So Get Lucky, Lose Yourself to Dance, great funky tracks. All the guest singing, I'm all for that. I really like when Daft Punk brings in sort of like an actual singer, even if it's not an actual singer or not someone well known. They kind of up the ante with Pharrell and Julian Casablancas and Panda Bear on this one. Whereas on Discovery, they kind of had just random people that at least I was unfamiliar with. Maybe they're famous in the DJ world or something like that, but just having like that human voice on here, I think really elevates the music underneath, elevates the songs. There's good structure to them. They're actual songs. It's not kind of just like dance club music. And, you know, a lot of good funk sounds, a lot of good bass, a lot of good synths. And I think it's a good, solid album. I have it at 3.5. It's 4, 3.5 somewhere, maybe a little bit like a tad too long. And a couple tracks in the beginning, I just can't quite get into like Give Life Back to Music, Game of Love, Giorgio by Moroder. Like it really doesn't start for me until Instant Crush. So maybe if you chopped off like the first 4 songs, it would be 4, maybe 4.5. But just something about the album doesn't quite flow for me. So I like it. It's a good album, but I don't like it as much as you two or the critics. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Actually, that song, what is it called?
Giorgio by Moroder.
I know that's like is an iconic person, but I do find that song to be a little bit off-putting. It's so like just a long like story, like as track 3. It's kind of like why do we have to get into that right now? I was just starting to get into the groove, you know. My number 2 pick, right? My number 2 is going to be Human After All. I am here to defend this record. It is obnoxiously repetitive. It feels almost like they're punking you, but the whole thing is really interesting to me. So I know they made it in a couple weeks, and for a band that has, to me, a near perfect discography, a band that I think is one of the greatest bands ever, this record is so strange, and it feels like for a band that takes forever to make music, why did you make a record that is so so jagged and so like it kind of feels unfinished? It feels almost like it's just confusing and a little bit off-putting. And but then again, it's a record made by 2 robots, and it's called Human After All. And it's like it feels like the whole thing is intentional to me. There's just something so interesting to me about it. And like Robot Rock, Prime Time of Your Life, these songs, I never get tired of them. And it's funny that I just have memories of listening to them in the back of the minivan. I'd make my parents listen to Human After All, and they hated it. They hated it. They just said they just could not understand why I was into it. But Television Rules the Nation, Technologic blew my mind when I first heard it. I used to have the whole thing memorized. You've even got songs like Emotion, which is I've just never heard anything like this song. There's a song about 2 robots. They're singing a song called Emotion. And it's like, they don't even understand what emotion is, because the song is almost emotional, but it's not quite. And then Robot Rock, opening track, We Are Human After All. It's just, the whole thing to me is just some sort of weird statement. And it just kind of shakes me in a weird way. It just shakes me in a weird way that it has it really high to me. I think it's a 5-star album. And I just think it is timeless in a weird way. And especially contextually in their discography, I actually do go back to this one a lot to listen to it. And I just think, and also, like I said, with past records, I do think that its incorporation in Alive 2007, which I guess came out, I think Human After All is 2005, right? So they use a lot of those songs to their fullest capacity in that live record. And perhaps, again, that might give me a little bit of bias or just some context that pushes it up for me. But yeah, I straight up love that album. And I love, and I'll say one more thing is that I think where Homework, they're still figuring out how to become Daft Punk. I definitely think whether the album is good or not, Human After All, they're definitely like operating like in character. They're like, we are 2 robots making a record and singing. They're really developing that vocoder sound and stuff that I just love. So yeah, 5-star for me for Human After All.
I'm pretty much with you. I'm not at 5 stars, but as a Daft Punk newbie, I thought this was a really cool record. Very much a left turn after Discovery, because that to me was rooted more in like 70s funk and disco and that sort of thing. And they return to that sound a lot on Random Access Memories, but this one in the middle is just like straight 80s. And I just love the sounds on this record are really what grabbed me. Just, you called it jagged, but yeah, the sound waves, the synth sounds that they're using, they're like a buzz saw. They're like the harshest, but they sound so cool. I love the way it sounds. So aggressive for electronic music to sound that aggressive. They might as well be like a punk rock band or something. I thought it was a really great sounding record. And I think it starts really, really strong. Human After All and Robot Rock. Television Rules the Nation's great. Technologic's awesome. I do think there's a little bit of a lull in the middle where it loses a little bit of steam with Make Love and The Brainwasher, On Off. I think those tracks are a little less engaging and they don't sound quite as aggressive as the tracks at the beginning part of the record. But overall, I think it's a really cool, interesting record. And I could not believe the reviews like that people generally consider this like their worst record. And I can't believe that because to me, it's so much cooler sounding than the first two. I'm like right on the fence between 3 and 3.5 stars. I think I got to go 3 because of that little dip in the middle.
Well, now for the best one. I think most people would have this at number 1. I think the only real choice, I guess I could see Random Access Memories, but I think Discovery is just an excellent, excellent album, even for people who don't like house and sort of, what Daft Punk started with Homework. This is definitely a big turn away from that. There's song structures, there's real instrumentation, and it just has like this big joyful sound, like right off the bat with One More Time, the way it builds, even just repeating that same kind of hook over and over, the way it's structured and the way they do it, like you don't really notice that it's like this repetition of just one more time and over because they break it up. Romanthony does the vocals on it and it sounds great to me. I've always loved One More Time. It was the first song I really heard from them. And then they keep going. The first 4 songs are just, I love. Aerodynamic has a ridiculously awesome guitar solo. Digital Love has this great break where they use the Wurlitzer piano that Supertramp used just for this one like 8-bar break towards the end of the song. And then they go into this crazy like synth solo with these vocal effects on top of it. I just think it's incredibly cool, unique sounding. Nothing else sounds like this. Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Another one where it's just like repeating the same kind of hook over and over, but the way they add things in and take things out and change things up, just make it fresh throughout the whole song. Face to Face is another one where like it sounds like they like chopped up a bunch of other songs and kind of like welded it together. Like the verse, it will just like shift really dramatically. And it's just another really cool example of them sort of just like, they're not doing like pop music, but they're like right around pop music, right around like 70s and 80s stuff, and doing it in their own unique style that only they could do. And it is, I mean, I guess I get Jason's point where like after this, everybody just stole the hell out of this album, like top to bottom, all the techniques and stuff that they used and sort of, started on this. You definitely hear that in 2000s pop, but that doesn't bother me at all. I think they were right to steal it from them because this is a great album. I have it at 4.5 stars. It's close to 5, but in my original, we did the album of the year series, went through every year. I had it at 4.5 then. It didn't quite break my top 5. It was my runner-up. So I got to leave it at 4.5, but it's a really great album that anyone can enjoy, even if you're not really a big Daft Punk or house or trance fan or whatever.
That is what I like to hear. That was a great review by Joe. It that won me back after all of your other takes on the other Daft Punk records. I can appreciate them with the context of this one. You've seen The Guiding Light. This is, to me, has to be number 1 as well. I love this album. This is top 10 all time for me. 5 stars for sure. This record just has a magic quality to it, and it goes beyond something I can even explain. For me, it's like the closest comparison to me is Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And I'm not even super into Floyd or that album, but just the way that that album is so cohesive and just so feels like like such a cohesive body of work that takes place on a different planet. That is how I feel about this record. Um, it starts strong and ends strong. I love Too Long, ironically, 10 minutes long. And I love One More Time. I think, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger is obviously, I'm assuming that's like their most popular song. I don't know what it is on Spotify, but, that's always been the iconic one through the years that people recall. I love that song. Short Circuit was one of my favorite songs right when I first heard this album. Still, I actually, I appreciate your comments on Digital Love, because the song Something About Us and Digital Love are both just, they step away from the total dance party, and it's like strange, kind of like what I was saying about that song Emotion on Human After All. These very emotional tracks, and they're very touching. Digital Love is actually probably one of my favorite songs of all time. If I was going to make a list, I think it's the perfect pop song. The structure is perfect of it. I love that epic guitar. It sounds like a guitar solo, but I don't know if it is even possible to be a guitar the way that the way that they're playing it. I didn't know that about about Supertramp. That's really cool. But yeah, through and through, I mean, 14 songs, an hour and 1 minute long, and the whole thing is just candy to me. Every song has a different style. Where Homework, you're like, okay, here's another track for the club. This record goes all different styles and sounds and tempos, and it's just a true journey to work through it. And I think that, although, yeah, like you said, like Random Access Memories was so critically acclaimed, I do think that this will, now that they've called it into their career, and we can look back at it all posthumously. I think that this album will have to be the pinnacle of their career. And they made that amazing. There's like an amazing movie that goes alongside it as well. That's really iconic to me and super cool. Yeah, I love every single song, and it just has a special place in my heart. This record breaks so many walls, and Jason, I can. I mean, it's interesting what you say. Maybe because I definitely was not into the Black Eyed Peas at the time, but I never really thought about it that way. But some of these songs, I can see how they were kind of lifted. Their style was, I was maybe a little bit too young to know fully contextually, but I can kind of see how it might have been lifted. Or obviously, you had Kanye West sampling Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, or re-recording it with them. That's really cool to hear about the ideas of them implementing and being a big influence on pop culture in ways that I probably actually don't even comprehend. So I can see how that would be frustrating, but at the same time is cool. And I do love how Daft Punk have always had a little bit their hands always behind the scenes, doing even more stuff beyond their records, which is pretty cool.
All right. So speaking of Daft Punk being a big player in pop music, never more so that I think than on Random Access Memories, which is my favorite Daft Punk record. I'm going all the way up to 4.5 stars as well. I think this is an amazing record, and they turn back away from the big like 80s synth sound of Human After All, back towards the funk and disco type of thing, but they go like all in on it, and it's not even so much like a house music version of that. It is just really like a genre exercise in like disco, funk, 70s, Soul Train type of stuff. A lot of live musicians playing on it, which is, I think, maybe a little different for them. I looked at all the personnel for their records, and I don't recall seeing so many studio musicians on any of their other records. The production on this record is amazing. I think one really cool thing about this record is all the guests that are on it, not just the studio players, but like the high profile guests, like you mentioned Panda Bear, and you got Julian Casablancas on it from The Strokes and Pharrell. And a lot of times on these records where you have a lot of guests like that, you'll see people kind of just like phoning it in, or they're using it as some way of like promoting their own material, or like getting exposure through guesting on and featuring on another record. But that doesn't seem to be the case on this record at all. It feels like everybody that is on this record is buying into whatever Daft Punk is, striving towards, and everyone's putting 110% into it, and everything works. There is not like a guest that comes onto this record and like drops the ball. I think every feature on this record is really good. Every song is just insanely hooky. Like you said about Discovery, it's just ear candy. I think it's just a pleasure to listen to. It's mixed so well. It sounds great. Nile Rodgers doing some of the production on there as well. It's killer. I think it's really great. And around this time, really in 2013 was when I think the tide started to turn in popular music, where I think it was just abysmal for years and years in the early 2000s. And I think it's kind of the tide started to turn around this time. And maybe it had a lot to do with this record, where I feel like there were a lot of pop hits that were massive, massive songs in 2013 that I liked a lot. And Get Lucky was certainly one of those. So there you have it. That's a listography of Daft Punk. Thanks to Nordista Freeze for joining us. He's going to stick around all week, do top 10 songs and side 3 with us as well. You guys got any final thoughts before we go on the Daft Punk experience?
I've had a great time being on here. I'm sad that the band is no more. I mean, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I just think this band's incredible, and they changed my life for sure. It changed my musical taste, and turned me on to a lot of new stuff. And I'm sad that we're not going to get any more songs by them. It just truly bums me out. And I did appreciate they did. I think the last production they ever did was the song Overnight by Parcels. If you know what I'm talking about. I love Parcels, and it's cool to see that as a last piece for them. I would also, as mentioned, if people haven't heard Alive 2007, that is perhaps one of the best live albums ever. It is so good. They take all of the songs from Homework, Human After All, and Discovery, and they're just putting them, like sampling them on top of each other, like taking a vocal line from this and a bass line from this and a synth from this, and they mix them together in like the most ridiculous way. It is truly a treat. I'm always, I got into that album in like 2009, I guess, and it's just a shame that I missed out on ever seeing them in that pyramid. And I respect them for always doing new stuff, but I wish they would have done a final tour. I wish I could have seen them live, because that would have just been life-changing. I respect them for doing what they need to do, but man, I do hope that one day they reunite, and I get to see them live at least once.
I can't top that, so we'll let that be the final word.
Sweet.
And you have some dates coming up that you'd like to let people know about?
Yes. Okay. I have a show. So like this week, the 16th, I'm playing in Memphis, the 17th in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 18th in Cleveland, Mississippi. I play about like 140 shows a year, and we now travel all across the U.S. So if anybody keeps in touch, if they want to keep in touch, they'll definitely be able to see me in the next year without driving very far. I can almost guarantee it, unless they live outside of the continental U.S. So it'd be cool to meet anyone, anytime.
Who knew that there was a Cleveland, Mississippi? You can catch Nordista there this week coming up.
That's right.
All right, everyone, drop down in the comments your own list and whatever you think of our lists. Hit the like button, subscribe if you've not subscribed to the channel yet, hit the bell for notifications, and we will see you in the next one with our top 10 favorite Daft Punk songs. We'll see you then.